Thank you. Welcome. So on behalf of the South Paris Institute, I would like to welcome you all to our inaugural event of our program, the Research and Policy Forum on Climate Change and Environment in the Arab World. I just want to, Professor Ramiz Ray will introduce you, Dr. Farajalla, in the lecture, but just to announce the upcoming lectures of the impact of climate change on the Arab world lecture series. So we have on March 4, Dr. Hamid Assa from the Faculty of Engineering and Architecture. He'll be talking about climate change, potential impact on water resources in the Middle East, and adaptation options. So I leave the floor to Professor Ramiz Ray. Professor Ramiz Ray is Professor of Land and Water Resources at the American University of Beirut. He's also our chairperson on the advisory, South Paris Institute Advisory Faculty Advisory Board. So, Professor Farajalla, Rami, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nadim. Thank you, everybody, for showing up today to this inaugural lecture on climate change and its impact on multiple sectors that the South Paris Institute of Public Policy and International Affairs is organizing. This is the inaugural lecture, implying that there will be many afterwards. There will also be a few small workshops, and we're also shooting at a large meeting around the fall, all around the issue of climate change, its impact in Lebanon and in the Arab world. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce today Professor Nadim Farajalla, a colleague of mine and a personal friend, and a co-worker in many areas, who will be inaugurating this series of lecture with the talk on the impact of climate change on multiple sectors in Lebanon. Nadim, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rami. Welcome, everyone. What I'm going to do today is going to go over briefly climate change and the different impacts it might have on several sectors. I'll start in general and then zoom into Lebanon itself. Well, I'll start out with a definition that I think is very important for people to keep in mind. There's a difference between climate and weather. Weather is basically your day-to-day state of the atmosphere. If it's rainy, sunny, cloudy, etc. It is very chaotic. One day it's something, the other day it's different. But what makes climate is the average of all those weathers. So this climate is predictable and fairly stable. And when we talk about climate, we talk about average temperatures over a period of time. We talk about the amount of precipitation. We talk about days of sunlight and many other variables that can be measured in space and time, in specific space and time. So we move on to climate change so that we now start focusing on issues. What is it? It is the variation in Earth's global climate or regional climates in specific regions. And what is causing this are two factors. One is internal to the Earth, and then the other is external. And external forces being sun rays coming in from outer space and the intensity of these and the fluctuations of these. And internal being the rotation of the Earth and whatever is in the mantle area. However, more recently, human activities have started influencing this climate and this change. And the most recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the UN's IPCC, deemed that there is a 90 to 95% likelihood that changes in modern climate have been caused by human action. So what did this IPCC report say? It says that climate change is unequivocal. It is happening. There is no doubt about it. It is happening, and there should be no question about it. And it further states that the climate of the Earth has, since the mid-20th century, been influenced by the increase in anthropogenic greenhouse gas releases. What are these activities that produce these greenhouse gases? decrease the burning of fossil fuels, production of CO2 and CH4. And also, something that is quite common in Lebanon, other than the small we produce, is the cement manufacture. It is the third largest source of carbon dioxide on Earth. Further, land use, agriculture, deforestation, urban sprawl, etc., contributes to global warming. And of particular weird, if you will, source is livestock. Cows belching, basically. Ruminant animals regurgitating something. And it produces 18% of the world's greenhouse gases and 65% of introduced nitrous oxide human use. So we move on to certain projections by IPCC. The temperature is expected to rise about 0.1 degrees Celsius per decade for the next 2 decades if we keep our greenhouse gas production at the level that was reached in the year 2000. This is important. This would also lead to an increase in temperature between 1.8 and 4 degrees Celsius. If we look at the Earth's map and look at the colors, the closer to red is the higher increase in temperature. And we can see here in our neighborhood, the temperature is deemed to increase between 3 and 5. It depends on the models that you work on, the global circulation models that you work with. But this is an expected range of increase in temperature. What would this increase in temperature affect? What effects will it have? An increase between 1 to 3 degrees Celsius above 1990. Some areas will benefit from it, some areas will not. They will have more costs. However, if we increase the temperature to beyond 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, everybody pays. There will be no net benefit, there will be net cost. So we need to keep this in mind. The effects of climate change that I will go over are distributed, I group them into these 7 categories. Health effects, agriculture and food supply, forests, forestry, ecosystems and biodiversity, coastal zones, water resources, and energy use and production. So when we start with health effects, there are 3 components to that. There are direct temperature effects. If the temperature rises, more heat waves and hot extremes are going to be faced, and this will impact most people that have heart problems, asthma, the elderly and the young. The elderly and the young have difficulty regulating their body temperatures. And the added temperature will add stress to people who have heart conditions. So these people will suffer directly. In addition, extreme events are predicted to accompany climate change. Extreme events as hurricanes, severe storms, floods, etc. So deaths directly related to these extreme events are going to increase, deaths and injuries. And coupled with those also, you will have infectious diseases. We all are aware of Katrina and what the diseases that accompany that, other than the death and destruction caused directly by that event. So these are issues that are important for us to realize. Other than these 2, there are climate-sensitive diseases. It is expected that there will be an increase in the risk of some infectious diseases, especially in warm areas. And these diseases will increase because they are vector-borne mostly, vector-like by mosquitoes and flies. And examples of these are malaria, dengue fever, yellow fever, and encephalitis. In areas that are already experiencing these diseases, due to the extension, there will be, due to the warmth, there will be an extension in the transmission season. And this will increase the exposure of people to these diseases, and then that will lead to an increase. Another issue that is important is air quality. Global warming is produced by, we said, carbon dioxide and CH4, and we have ozone at lower levels, O3. And this ozone is damaging to lung tissues. Accompanying that also, we have particulates that are discharged into the atmosphere. These also reach deep into the lung tissues and cause problems to the same people, mainly asthmatics and the elderly and the young. So if we put that aside and then move on to look to agriculture and food supply, there are benefits, of course, to warmer seasons, to warmer climates. These are, you have a longer season, and you might have more carbon dioxide, which leads to more photosynthesis and production of green matter. But however, these benefits will be more than offset by increase in potential of droughts and floods. And then heat waves, that's another extreme that might kill your crops. The increase in temperature would lead eventually to a reduced water supply. This reduction in water supply is going to the reduced amount will go to people first and then to agriculture. So agricultural production will suffer. Increased temperatures will lead to increase the evaporation and depletion of soil moisture. Increased temperatures will lead to higher risks of fires. And as we said, that people will suffer from diseases because pests and vectors are going to increase in numbers. So will the crops and the livestock that are part and parcel of agricultural production. So when we have an average temperature increase, what will happen? This will lengthen the growing seasons in regions with relatively cool spring, Northern Europe, Central and Northern Europe. But it will adversely affect crops in regions where summer heat already limits production. So in areas where you have really hot weather in summer, where plants cannot survive well or produce in good enough numbers, this added heat is going to stress the plants and production is going to fall. Evaporation rates are going to increase, therefore the demand for water is going to increase. And with the increases in temperature and the reduction in precipitation, what will happen is we'll have more droughts, and the frequency of droughts will increase. Global warming or climate change will induce a change in rainfall amount and in rainfall patterns. The precipitation will increase in higher latitudes. So we'll have a little bit more rain in higher latitudes, but it will decrease in subtropical land regions. So areas that were prior to this evolving event, they'll have less water available to them. Extreme precipitation events are expected to increase. So we'll have many more severe storms, many more floods. And these severe storms will tie into a higher rate of soil erosion. I will talk a little bit about that later. And because of the evaporation, I keep stressing this, we have lower soil moisture. So plants cannot really grow well. The rising atmospheric concentration, rising temperature will lead to higher concentrations of carbon dioxide. This will enhance crop growth, such as wheat, rice, and soybeans. But keep in mind, when these do not survive and they die, they release back the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So this increased sink might become a larger source of carbon dioxide. Pollution levels, which go hand in hand with the reasons that are causing our climate change, will also be detrimental to plants. High levels of ground level ozone will limit the growth of crops. Ozone, by the way, is used actually for treating wastewater. It's a highly oxidizing agent. So if you add that to the atmosphere, it's going to lower atmosphere, it's going to kill plants. And any excess yield would be then offset by this ozone. Agriculture, as an observation and expectation, agriculture in industrialized countries is expected to be less vulnerable to climate change than countries that are poorer, because these countries are unable to adapt to climate change. So agriculture and those that rely on agriculture will suffer more. And to just wrap up on this, the agriculture sector's ability to cope with climate change and adapt to it rely on many things. It relies on future changes in technology, what is available to farmers to help those people adapt and produce in a different manner. Changes in demand for food. People might shift from rice maybe to sorghum or other less water-intensive plants. Environmental conditions such as water availability and soil quality will impact, as we said, our production, and then these changes in availability of water, making more water available when it's needed, can also affect how agriculture responds. Of significant importance is management practices. The ability for farmers or communities or countries to switch from one crop to another as changes dictate, moving from high water requirement plants to lower water requirement plants that produce equally well at that temperature. So we move on then to forests. Forests and agriculture are sort of tied together because the basic component of it is a plant. The effects on forests include forest health and productivity and the geographic range of certain species. The health of plants, as we had indicated for agriculture, you might have more pathogens and more vector-borne diseases that will really do well in a warmer climate. And these would affect the trees. Trees under stress of heat will not be able to resist. The resilience will be lower against pathogens. So trees will suffer and forests will start dying back. And also forests will start shifting and moving northward as seeking lower temperature climates. For example, the effects on forestry will be timber production will be reduced, less timber available, or poorer quality timber. Outdoor recreation activities, if there are no forests to go to, no activities in forests. Water quality will be impacted. Forests are essential for filtering, if you will, water as it percolates into the groundwater. They help retard flow on the surface and allow it to infiltrate. So water availability and quality will be affected. Forests are habitats for many species of animals, wild and semi-wild. And these, by moving, shifting, or changing the constitution of these forests, this will have a definite impact, mostly negative, on wild animals and wildlife. Carbon storage would shift. Initially, it's expected that carbon storage would increase, with more carbon being taken into by forests. But then, as fires and problems occur, because of the rising temperature, there will be a net release of carbon dioxide as we go along. So forests, and we've seen this in Lebanon. We've had this summer extensive fires. Imagine if these forests are not able to regenerate because of elevated temperature and lower water availability. So these are issues that we need to keep in mind. Moving to ecosystems and biodiversity, I'd just like to start out with a small definition on what an ecosystem is. It's an interdependent functioning system of plants, animals, and microorganisms. These are found at any scale. It could be the pool, the pond right outside your house, all the way to a semi-continental Sahara, Mojave Desert, Sahara, anything like that. A huge range in scale. So it's not one thing, it's many things. The effects on terrestrial species have, and it has been monitored, it will be a onward movement and elevational range shifts of flora and fauna. These flora and fauna will see climates that are most suitable to them. Now, if temperatures exceed 2 to 3 degrees Celsius relative to pre-industrial levels, 20 to 30% of species, terrestrial species, will face extinction. And what is more important and very critical is that the resilience of many ecosystems are likely to be exceeded within this century. So this will drive many species to extinction. There is a problem also with synchronicity. Bees or pollinating insects might come into season before plants, or flowers might bloom before the insects come in. And this lack of synchronicity would be detrimental to the reproduction and the reproductive ability of plants. So, further, coastal zones. Coastal zones are subject to sea level rise. It's expected that the sea level will rise anywhere between about 20 centimeters to 60 centimeters in the next century. This rise is expected to inundate coastal wetlands and low-lying areas. This rise in the sea will erode beaches, sandy beaches, and will intensify floodings. Any storm that comes in at a higher, where the sea is a little bit higher, will flood areas more. It is intuitive. However, what is not so intuitive is that when you put up 2 feet of water, this is going to force more salt water into our coastal aquifers. In Lebanon, we do suffer from that because we overpump our coastal aquifers. Imagine if overpumping is coupled with more seawater that is being introduced into your aquifers. There's a problem there. What is also important is that people realize that their beaches are being eroded. So they start setting up structures and taking measures to stop or to mitigate the effects of coastal erosion. These measures in themselves might adversely affect the environment and public access to beaches and the utility of these beaches. There will be a land loss in coastal zones due to elevated sea levels. Coastal wetlands, we had said, and salt marshes are particularly vulnerable. The mixture between fresh water and salt water that make up these wetlands might be tipped in favor of the salt water, and species that existed there will not exist anymore. The sea level would rise to such a level that it will inundate plants that do not grow above a certain height. And wetlands will try to retreat. When these wetlands try to retreat, people have built up right behind them, so there cannot be any retreat for these wetlands, and eventually these wetlands will die. Sea level, for example, could convert as much as 33% of the world's coastal wetlands to open water. For example, in the US, a 60-centimeter rise would inundate or eliminate approximately 26,000 square kilometers of wetlands. This is a lot. Coupled with that is the changes in storms and flooding. We said that patterns and amounts of storm events will change. This will lead to flooding from wave action. Waves will be larger. Beach erosion will be more significant. And then, coupled with that, when you have the sea rising higher and you have high intensity storms, coastal areas will flood from rain and from the sea. Those people inside have experienced this probably about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when the entire Corniche area was flooded because of high waves. This is quite common. And again, we go back to the implications for water resources. Water resources would be affected by the intrusion of salt water, whether that is groundwater or surficial waters as tidal waters creep in farther inland. We move now specifically to water resources. Climate change would increase temperatures and would play around with precipitation. Either increase it slightly, decrease it slightly, change the patterns. And this will have an impact on water availability. Increase in net solar radiation or temperature would speed up the hydrologic cycle. Once that speeds up, it means the evaporation is going to occur faster, condensation is going to come in faster, storms would drop in, clouds would drop in their rain at a faster rate, which means more intensity, and then the cycle will repeat itself. The importance of this is that soil moisture and available water to be trapped might be not available for us. Keep in mind that nothing is in separate systems. We have forests and land use that will help retard flow, superficial flow. When these are burnt away, as in forest fires that might increase during this climate change, that will leave our soil exposed to erosion. When topsoil is removed, there is very little to hold back water for infiltration to infiltrate into our groundwater. So we will lose that amount of water infiltrating. It will just run off into the sea, carrying with it sediments. Further, a higher temperature would mean there is a lower snowpack, a smaller snowpack. Snowpack is what many countries rely on for either in Europe or Northern America for glaciers. They build up during winter and then they release their water slowly into rivers. In Lebanon and areas like Lebanon, we rely on our snowpack in the mountains to recharge our groundwater. If these snowpacks do not develop, or they develop in a very limited manner, we'll have less water available for us. Hand in hand with intensification of rains will be the quality of water being affected. Runoff would collect a lot of sediment and transport it to the sea. So waters running in rivers are turbid, are sediment laden, and these sediments might have pollutants absorbed onto them. Higher temperatures might will effectively increase the temperature in water bodies, and higher temperatures in water bodies mean lower dissolved oxygen. Lower dissolved oxygen would stress aquatic animals and plants. So, one more thing, again, stream flow will be affected due to either the early melting of snowpacks or the non-appearance of snowpacks. Finally, we look at the energy sector here. Energy production and use. If we look at energy use, demand will change, for sure, since rising temperatures would lead to increased demand for air conditioning, for cooling down the buildings we stay in. This is on the negative side. On the plus side, we would need to have less warming during winter. But the net effect is going to be more energy used to cool things down. Energy consumed for climate-sensitive processes would increase. For example, we need to pump more water to irrigate. So energy is going to go into pumping that water. We need to cool our greenhouses, so we need to have more energy to cool down our greenhouses. We need energy to refrigerate, and the differences in temperature between the refrigerated and the non-refrigerated means that we need to apply more energy for that. And so stored produce and medicine, etc., that need refrigeration would spend more into that. Energy production, even though little research has been conducted in this area, but there are impacts that are anticipated. Hydropower generation will not be as steady or as constant, because stream flow will change dramatically, because rain patterns will change over a period of time. We cannot rely on hydropower alone. Infrastructure for production and distribution would also be affected. Imagine if we have, instead of, we have severe events where wind blows in, and we've seen it everywhere here. A storm comes in and all the electric lines go down. So that's a problem. There's a cost involved in that. In summer, there will be a high, the generation of power would require more cooling, and the transmission wires would become excessively heated, and there will be power interruptions. And that will also affect power plant operations. Some renewable energy sources will be affected. Increased cloudiness may bring down solar power generation. Wind generation might be affected as well, because winds will shift and change. So these are issues that we need to talk about and consider. We move on. We've seen part of the effects. What are they? But what do we do? There are mitigation measures that are to be taken. Lebanon is not a country where we have any influence on the net carbon. Our net carbon footprint is very low. We can affect a little bit, but when compared to China, the US, and Europe, we are insignificant. So that's why I focus only on adaptation when I'm presenting my presentation. What do we do to adapt? Again, I'm going to follow the same track that we have presented. In human health, there needs to be a mobilization of adequate financial and human public health resources, such as training, surveillance of disease outbreaks, and response and prevention to diseases. This has to be taken. We need to plant more trees in our urban areas to moderate temperature increases. I'll show you in a little bit a slide about Beirut. Weather advisories to warn people of high particulate matter in the atmosphere, or high extreme heat waves coming in. This will allow people that are most sensitive to go indoors and stay indoors and avoid these temperatures. We need to store grain and food supplies, because due to droughts, people will go hungry, and we need to fight famine. So this is an aspect of adjusting to that. Plus, then go into clothing and activities outdoors. This goes without saying. In coastal areas, what needs to be done is we need to identify areas along the coast that need protection, and identify areas that can adapt naturally, so that we reduce our intervention as humans and allow nature to take its course. We need to analyze the environmental consequences of shore protection, and then also promote eco-friendly shore protection measures and techniques. We don't want to intervene and cause more problem. And we need to identify land use measures to ensure that wetlands migrate as seawater rises. As I had said before, we cannot build right behind wetlands and then allow the sea to rise. Wetlands do not have anywhere to migrate. So we need to identify in our analysis, environmental analysis and identification of shores requiring protection, we need to make sure that we make available corridors for migration. We have to develop in areas that do not have, or improve in areas that do have early warning systems of floods and high waves to avoid hazards to humans. And we need to make sure that we have in place measures to protect against saltwater intrusion, mainly along the coast, prevention of excessive pumping, and if possible, recharge into our groundwater, into our coastal groundwater. In agriculture and forestry, we need to look at altering the planting dates. If the seasons are shorter or longer, we can plant earlier. And then this way we do not stress the plants into summer where it is hotter. We need to look at altering our cropping mix, what goes with what and when, to meet this new climate. We need to breed new plants and possibly new cows that are more tolerant to changed climates and equally productive at the same time. We need to look at how to prevent or suppress fires where possible in forests. And then we need to really work on insect control, outbreaks of insects. In ecosystems and wildlife, we need to protect and enhance migration corridors. We keep going to that, but migration corridors is not now from the sea. It's allowing forests to migrate either higher in altitude or northwards in latitude. We need to identify management practices that will ensure the successful attainment of conservation and management goals, especially when focusing on the measures that will confer resilience to ecosystems. So that when this change is happening, when this warming is happening, these ecosystems can adapt better. For water resources, we have to do many things. And these are what we're describing here are readily attainable, readily doable, not very expensive. We can look at altering infrastructure or institutional arrangements to be able to more flexibly adapt. We need to work on on the demand side rather than the supply side. We need to manage our water demand much better. We need also, in that vein, work on improving water use efficiency, and then plan for using alternative sources of water, either we use wastewater or desalinate seawater. Again, when we're looking at demand, we need to look at how to allocate water. Where do we put our water? Shall we rely on water going to agriculture, for domestic use, for industry, for tourism, for environmental flows? We need to study this very carefully and make sure that we do apply a wise allocation plan. We have to work on maintaining soil moisture and conserving it through mulching and other techniques. And then we have to protect, again, our coastal freshwater from saltwater intrusion. In energy, we need to increase energy efficiency to offset the increase in energy consumption. Move to technologies that are much more efficient than we are currently using. We need to make sure that facilities, production facilities and transmission lines are adequately protected against extreme events. And then finally, we have to look at diversifying our power supply. Not rely solely on burning fossil fuels or hydropower, maybe a mixture of all these. Tidal power generation, wind generation, solar power, etc. We need to look at all options and diversify. These are the broad strokes of what can be done. Where are we with respect to this in Lebanon? Lebanon had produced between 1999 and 2002 the first national communication on climate change. And they're now in the process of producing the second one, just got launched. I believe we are signatories to the Kyoto Agreement. And there are other equally important steps that have been taken by the Ministry of Environment towards that, and they're quite active. I'm sure the Ministry people and Dr. Hajjan will be able to enlighten us more. I just want to show you some data that we have collected here at the UB. Temperature in Beirut, maximum temperature, for the past 125 years. has not changed significantly. That's the maximum temperature. Okay, statistically, no significant change. However, when we look at the minimum temperature, it has changed significantly. This increase is about 3 degrees Celsius since 1874. So there's a huge increase in temperature.
Where was the station?
Pardon?
Where is the probe? Is this a...
This is taken from AUB Observatory and the airport observatory. Beirut rainfall has not changed significantly over the past 124 years. It's been constant. Okay? This is also the same in the Bekaa at Arik, our farm. Maximum temperature and minimum temperature have been constant. The minimum temperature maximum temperature has not changed significantly. Minimum temperature has increased to about 2 degrees Celsius. In Beirut, the number of rainy days has increased and the intensity has decreased. This is consistent with data of other areas in the Eastern Mediterranean. So we are still, in terms of water, we're okay, but our temperature is rising. Arik rainfall also slightly, there's no increase in rainfall, significant. However, when we look at a spin-off or one of the results of climate change is the ENSO, or El Niño Southern Oscillation events, and what impacts it might have on Lebanon. If we look at the yellow dots up here, these are El Niño events and the maximum temperatures beyond one standard deviation that we looked at. There are few extreme events that are explained by El Niño. What is critical and really outstanding is when you look at La Niña. It's the opposite of El Niño. It is where you have less rain occurring. El Niño produces higher rainfall. La Niña, if you look at a lot of the lower rain events or lower rainy years, they match quite well with La Niña. So there is a lot of work to be done in this area. So, and in a study conducted for INDIAC and funded by the British Council, we found that, or a group of experts were questioned, and we solicited their opinions. It's nothing solid. This was set up as a precursor for further studies. We anticipate that there will be a decrease in available water and a decrease in the quality of this available water in Lebanon. Due to the loss of synchronicity, some flora species would disappear. Others will be put under severe stress. Forests will disappear. Some forests will disappear and be replaced by herbaceous species. Weeds, as you call them, are much faster to adapt than hardwood plants, and they tend to take over areas. Mammals, there is expected to be an increase in rodents because warmer weather keeps them alive. Can you imagine the trees we have, how many mice it has killed? Quite a bit. If we don't have this cold weather, we have many more mice. And this will increase the predators, the number of predators that prey on these rodents, to the detriment of other large prey predators. So cats, foxes, jackals would do well. Hyenas, wolves, etc. might not be so lucky. Insects, we expect that mosquitoes, nuisance insects we call them, mosquitoes, flies, to increase in numbers. And some species will disappear, such as butterflies that migrate through or have their cycle in Lebanon. Birds will also be affected detrimentally. And that's basically because our migrating route will shift. We'll have less water for waterfowl to come in and land. It will be warmer, so birds, the general winds, the jet stream will shift, and birds flying through might shift their migratory routes. Habitats again will change. aquatic systems will witness a shift northwards in species, and there will be a change in the spawning season. These are just some ideas of what might happen. We need to work on those to make sure that what we theorize is really a reality. So I brought up 4 points that are of interest, or I think are important for us to work on in terms of adaptation and what can we do. There is a main role for the government. And we should first focus on adaptation technologies and management. This is what we can do. We cannot, in fact, have any impact on what is being generated on a worldwide level. We are basically recipients of this. So we need to adapt to what's happening. The government needs to promote the use of less polluting and more energy efficient technologies. This through subsidies, through tax incentives, through any agreement with the private sector and the industry. This will help a lot, and it will reduce pollution as well as reduce our carbon footprint. NGOs have a major role here. NGOs have to be a good watchdog to this. Make sure that the policies that are being set to fight climate change, to adapt to climate change, are really being adhered to, and not just pay lip service. In academia, we have a major role to play. We need to work on research as to the impact of climate change, to what the true impact on our various sectors, and how are we able to react to this and do this both sides of the coin research. So these are important aspects that we need to work on. I'm sure there are many other things that we can work on, but this is just to get the ball rolling and throw things out, ideas to you, how to work things out. And with this, I am here to stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadim. I shall actually use my chair privilege to ask the first question, and then I'll open the floor because this is bugging me. Nadim, you actually showed us a number of adaptation measures, and when I looked at them, I didn't see anything special to climate change. These are measures that we need to use or to adopt in order to adapt to the unfolding changes in the world, changes in population, changes in urbanization, changes in food demand, in Europe. So what's so different? I mean, even if climate change did not even exist, we would still have to go through that.
You're perfectly right. It's a win-win situation. Climate change is caused by our activities. We pollute. When we humans work and build and whatever, we have an impact on our environment. This in itself is polluting. And climate change is a result of excessive pollution, if you will, on a long term. It's not an acute, it's a chronic disease, if you will. So it's happening, it's coming, we know it's coming. If we reduce the impact that we have on our environment through less polluting technologies, we will be at the same time reducing our emissions of those greenhouse gases, and this will enable us. I mean, there's nothing new with that. You're right, nothing new in our adaptation techniques, but they are for better living. Better laboratory practices, good laboratory practices that we follow. These are best management practices for our field, so that we reduce our pollution, and at the same time, we will be reducing our carbon footprint. On that, there's nothing new, but it is something that we have to do. We have to realize that if we keep doing this, the problem with climate change is it is not reversible, or if it is reversible, it's very slowly reversible. So the faster we act, the better off we will be in the long run.
Mr. Miller. Sorry.
So if I got this right from what you both have said now.
Yeah, use the microphone, Nadim.
So if I got this right from this small dialogue now, this means if we go with the business as usual, we're fine.
I didn't say that, no.
Okay.
Are we doing business as usual now?
What Dr. Srey has said, that this is what we are doing now. We are trying to.
No, I said this is what we should do, whether climate change exists or not. And the reason why I asked this question, Nabil, is that the debate seems to be lost between whether climate change exists or not. And my point is that whether it exists or not, frugality has to replace extreme consumption in which the world seems to have slipped. That the debate in itself about whether it's 1 degree or 2 degrees, whether it will change the face of nature or not, is actually a non-debate, because whether it comes up or not, food is scarce. And you can see this from the food prices today in the world, with or without the drought that has hit Australia, with or without the bumper crops that have been experienced in Brazil. Frugality is the order of the day, whether climate change is a fact or not. That was what I was saying. There.
Thank you, Dr. Farajalla, for an interesting presentation, and thank you, Ram, for giving me the floor. I think going back to the question that Rami has raised is like, I stopped smoking for cancer, but I stopped smoking also for heart attacks and for my skin to be well. There seems to be one independent variable that is affecting all other dependent variables, be it food scarcity or climate change. So the specificity of the independent variables that are affecting climate change vis-a-vis other problems, global problems, which Rami raised, perhaps there's so much commonalities between those variables that are affecting the effects that we are seeing. And they seem to be overlapping, and that's why perhaps Rami is coming from this angle into what is new vis-a-vis the variables that we need to take into consideration that affect climate change and no other. And I think this is a very interesting way of looking at things, and try to focus on the specificities of the dependent variables that are specific to climate change and not specific to other international issues of concern to the progress of quality of life on Earth.
Corinne.
I have two questions actually. The first one, how do you think we can effectively address the issue of climate change in conflict countries like Lebanon, where we have decision makers and the people interested in political issues only? The second question is maybe for Dr. Dej. It's what is the actual and the current position of Lebanon, of the Lebanese government in UNFCCC and Kyoto meetings? Do we follow the Arab League position, which is mainly influenced by Saudi Arabia, or not?
Conflict countries are, we are in a country here that are supposedly are in conflict. Any country where, I think, it's my opinion, that if you want people to act, you have to show them that their action will save them money, basically. It's all about the dollar sign. Health is very abstract. If you have money, you have health, practically, or access to good health care. If you don't, then you get sick. That's what we're trying to show. Well-to-do countries, one of the examples we said that in well-to-do countries, agriculture will be able to adapt. In poor countries, agriculture will not be able to adapt, and they will suffer. People will suffer there. We have to highlight, this is why academia has a role with the government maybe, to show that any impact that we have on our environment, be it in terms of climate change, which is the thing that sound that's rumbling behind you, and then the constant sound, and then the acute environmental issues like the firecracker. You hear it bang, and you hear that, but there's still a larger sound coming at you. If we show that both have a very dire consequence in terms of monetary survivability of a country or a community, that might help people see it better in a way. Until awareness is raised in a country and people are sensitized truly to what the environment is about and how we can live within our environment in a sense that does not pollute, that we'll still be able to do a good quality of life, not at the cost of the environment, but while promoting environmental awareness. This is what I have. I don't know about the Kyoto, Dr. Hajian will be able to answer.
If you want Do you want to? I've got absolutely. Another couple of questions to you, guys. I'll ask you to join.
Well, Lebanon is a signatory of the UNFCCC and also of the Kyoto Protocol. We are definitely positioning ourselves within the context of the Arab League, and the Arab League is positioning itself within the context of the G77. And most of the Arab League is actually positioned not completely aligned with the Saudi Arabian position, which is more towards not lessening the use of fossil fuel. And actually the Arab League announced in its ministerial declaration that it is willing to host the adaptation fund, knowing that adaptation, as you mentioned, Dr. Farajalla, is an extremely important matter for countries that their carbon footprint is minimal or insignificant, as you described it. So this is more or less the position of Lebanon within the context of the Arab League.
I would like to ask, has anything been done in the process of adaptation here in Lebanon, or is it just talk and signing protocols? Has anything been done on the ground?
Some things have been done. I mean, the gentleman of the ministry can easily tell you, but there's a company in Lebanon that deals with carbon trading. That's one of the things that help reduce emissions worldwide. And we've worked on, I think there are many projects that are aimed towards awareness raising and identification of issues, problems. Exactly what has been done in terms of real projects, I don't know, but any measure taken to combat pollution would help reduce the impact on the environment, on the climate change issue.
Hi. Well, Dr. Farajalla, I want to ask sort of a philosophical question more, or your standing on it. And it deals with us being scientists a little bit. Sometimes being a research scientist makes you think in a way a little different than the rest of the world. When all the world thinks about, religion, ethics, what is good, what is bad, we sort of tend to think about the environment sometimes, which is good or bad is another philosophy. But there is one, trend of thought, if you like, that says, well, let it happen. Let the diseases come, let the floods come. They will reduce the population of the world, and then everything will arrange itself at the end. Because ultimately, what is 1,000 years? A second, geologically, in the past history, we know of at least five major extinctions where more than 95% of all species on Earth died. We know of 5. We might even find in geological record even of more. Well, make it 6.
That's what the dinosaurs said.
No, I agree. I'm really arguing against myself, but I want to know, it's not necessarily my argument. It's one of the arguments out there, and I would like to know your thought, or maybe the thought of somebody else on it.
It is. In my opinion, if you want, we can all die off. If that comes quickly, معلش خليها. But if it lingers, if it takes a long time, because 1,000 years may be a blink of an eye geologically, but this could wipe out human race in a very slow death. And there might be reverses to this climate change. This warming might be reversed, but will we have enough of a gene pool left for humans to regenerate with the same and respread? I don't know. To me, human life is precious. We need to make sure that what we are, and this is what I believe, we are custodians of this land. We are not here to do with it as we wish. We have to send it back, give it back to our kids in a better state than we received it. And then by our kids' chore or onus will be on them to improve it and give it in a better state to their children. So this cycle has to be followed, and rather than say let the chips fall where they may, this is too fatalistic, and no, I don't believe humans are fatalistic when it comes to life and death.
Scientists think it is different than the rest of the people.
Thank God there are fewer scientists than there are normal people.
Dr. Devin, did you have a question?
This question is a little bit beyond the scope of this presentation, but it's interesting to ponder about the factors affecting climate and how, to what extent we on this planet are able to influence them. But how important is this, relatively speaking, to what is taking place in our solar system and the impact of these changes on the planet, on our planet?
If you go to the extreme, and maybe Imad wants to go there, we might end up like Mars. There is evidence that Mars had a viable river system, and where there is water, there is life. If you might not agree, but this is what's being said. We might, at the extreme, end up being like Mars, an inhospitable planet where nothing is alive. But it might not be. I don't go beyond our atmosphere.
Coming back to more realistic questions.
Thank you.
All right.
Getting worse.
We are in a small room and we are a small group of people. How can your group and the minister be more active, more, if you want to say, proactive to involve people, NGOs, government, academia in what you mentioned as adaptation and mitigation of the climate change on one side, because this is the immediate for Lebanon. And how can we make it an issue to everyone, not just for mitigation and adaptation, but also to put our share in reducing the climate change?
It's a whole campaign.
Do we have this campaign?
In the Act started with a good campaign. They did start with a good campaign back in November, end of November. Sorry, yes, December. Close to the end of November, early December. They had a campaign. But the issue is, I strongly believe we have to start at the grassroots to create pressure groups that will influence the political will. And people will say, let us stay alive now, everything is breaking down, the house is coming down on us, and let's just forget about climate change, and let's address certain more critical issues. What is critical about climate change is if we keep going business as usual, there is no way of coming back. There is no way of coming back. At least for humans to pull back this rolling train. We have to start with a grassroots campaign and try to influence. We are very poor citizens in Lebanon, in the sense that we do not hold our representatives accountable. And we have to create this accountability by, we end up talking politics, but it's not that. I mean, we should hold people accountable for what they stand and what they say. And if they don't do what they say, next time around, they don't get voted into office. And we have to bring to the fore the environment as a critical issue. Because if we in Lebanon suffer, then we have to make people heard around this area, at least first, that Lebanon will suffer immensely if climate change occurs. We will suffer much more than Saudi Arabia, for sure. Because we are on a fringe ecosystem. We are around the rim of the Mediterranean. Beyond us are deserts, all the way around. So we need to start with grassroots, children, high school kids, get those people really aware that there's a problem. Put it as part of our curriculum at the university. And then work with the government so that the government will generate a political will. Because without political will, nothing happens. Nothing. Political will.
Do we have political will?
He has the will. I know for a fact. Dr. Bash has that will, but at the higher levels, maybe we could. Maybe we could.
Somebody had a question there.
Contemplating on business as usual. You started your presentation with an estimation of 1.5 to 3 or 5 degrees Celsius increase and other stuff. For business people and businessmen and corporations and cartels, it doesn't mean anything because they have business. Okay, we have summits on World Summits on environment. We have business summits like the DAFA Summit and others. And in such summits, they do not discuss such issues. And bad business for some people is good business for others. And even you mentioned the costs and people thinking in money. Yeah, cartels and corporations were thinking we are doing fine with 3 billion profits rather than 2 billion or 1 billion or 1 million thinking about such issues. So what should be done about that?
But there's a part of your statement is not true. Davos, they brought up water as a critical issue. Okay? And following up with what Rami has said here, in preventive measures, we need to be able to preserve our water supply and conserve what we have, and then increase our reuse of water that has been already distributed. If you want to make it an issue, a financial issue, this is what I said earlier. We have to clearly highlight the dollar value for any activity that is done, business as usual, versus a reduction and implementing preventative measures, how in the long run to save money for people. If you say, if we have a 3 degrees Celsius increase, it means your cooling costs are going to go high, sky high. This is going to cut into your profit margin. If people have environmental migrants, you have many, many more environmental migrants. Think of Bangladesh, for example. Bangladesh is a delta. It is practically totally inundated at any point in time during a year, at some point in time during the year, either by rising sea levels or from floods from the rivers that discharge into the sea there. These people in Bangladesh, if the sea level rises significantly, and for example, also the Maldives Islands, people will migrate, they will move somewhere else. That will be an added pressure on other communities, and they will have to cater for these people, and these people will be poor. They will ring around cities, and this, you will lose your labor force, you will lose your consumer market, and you will have to sink in a lot more money to adapt to what's going to happen. So if you can start, as in industrialized countries, reducing your carbon footprint and implementing some mitigation and adaptation measures, the cost in the long run will be much smaller. You might not be, pardon me?
For who?
For everybody.
I do care about Bangladesh, and I do care about the Maldives.
No, I'm going to give you an example of Bangladesh.
But we are living in a world of business and politics.
Fine.
So
look at the Netherlands. The Netherlands are keeping, this country is keeping the North Sea back through a gate. There will come a time when this gate is not sufficient and the entire country will be inundated. That's a Western country that is that might suffer. The U.S., about 60% of world population lives on the coast. And these areas will be detrimentally affected, they'll be negatively affected. So that will add to, you will lose your market as a business person. You will have to relocate. It's going to cost you a lot. In the floods of the Mississippi in the early 90s, the costs were unbelievably high to insurance companies. Many went broke. Many communities had to uproot themselves and move uphill so that they're not even inundated. There is a tremendous cost. If we bring these to the fore as examples of what might happen and the costs associated with those, this is what we should, as academics, bring in to show what would happen, to run through different scenarios and put a dollar value to it. We have not done our job well enough in putting dollar values to these issues.
I'll take a couple of more questions, so if there's something pressing, let's have it.
Actually, I have a question about the data you showed for Beirut, because much of the credibility given to climate change is related to actual observations. The reason many people are worried because they actually, all the reports of rising temperatures. So it's actually important that, that the data you presented is that, the question is that, have you done any other kind of analysis to it, let's say spectral analysis, where you looked at, let's say, the other frequencies, I'm talking about the temperatures and the precipitation data that you actually just showed?
Yes.
And also, has this data been published before?
No. This... Anymore?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm interested in, because you mentioned that the minimum temperature is actually lower. Now, But someone like me would be interested in knowing, let's say, what other causes that actually behind that. And is this really significant? And you mentioned that it is actually similar to what happens in the Eastern Mediterranean. Some information of the Eastern Mediterranean shows that actually there is some kind of maybe precipitation is going lower, but the temperature in some places actually is cooling in some locations. So, in other words, can you actually present the temperature record that you showed?
Yes, this data is actually in a paper that's going to be published.
Right.
It's been submitted for publication.
I see.
They wrote that.
Yeah.
It has been sent for publication. The issue is we in Beirut, the reason, part of the reason is that there's a heat island effect on the 3 degrees Celsius. But it does not explain everything, because in the Bekaa we have our weather station out in the field, and it recorded not as severe a trend as an increase as that was shown in Beirut. So if you want the exaggeration of the slope, the increase in the slope is probably due to the heat island effect. But an increase of about 1.8 to 2.1, I forgot which it is, in the Bekaa mirrors what is happening in Beirut, plus that 1 degree extra would be due to the heat island effect. So this data is there. In many areas in the Eastern Mediterranean, there is no change in rainfall. There are some, like Cyprus, that have shown increase in rainfall. And there is in Jerusalem, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there is a net decrease in rainfall. But these are localized. Jerusalem is farther inland. Cyprus is an island. So the dynamics controlling the weather patterns in those areas are slightly difficult.
Yeah, what I'm trying to bring out is it's important that actually when this data is presented that you have to take, pay extra caution here, because as I mentioned earlier, there's also the credibility given to climate change because of recorded temperatures. I mean, if we were to see something like a decline in the next, let's say, 10 years globally, we would lose faith in the whole thing, talk about climate change. It's really what's driving the whole thing, I think, is of course two things. It's what scientists believe that through modeling and the actual observations that we see. But in reality, they are actually just a short record. They're just
not so short, no, because you have to be careful. You have to take the ice cores that were taken. You have 3 ring studies that have showed the differences in pattern and climate, and that has been associated with different climate changes or warmings and then coolings around the Earth. So the trend has been established, and that was mirrored in many areas with recorded temperatures, because temperatures weren't recorded that frequently in the 18th and 19th century. It wasn't there. But there is quite a bit of credibility to the data that we have.
Okay, I think the last, may I think the gentleman raised his hand. Nabil,
if I can add one more.
And then we'll wrap up, if you're allowed.
Thank you. Regarding back the what we could do here, I mean, all over the world, some people might agree or disagree with that the world is doing something about climate change, and this is a international debate. Some are with, some are against. Some are saying, well, it is there, it will happen soon, it will happen after 80 years, 100 years. So the debate is there. But I think when we look here in Lebanon, I think we lack a lot. And I'm not saying this because this is sort of a pessimistic picture. On the contrary, I think a lot of individuals or even the government at one point or in some areas are trying to do their best. But let's not show that this is something very simple. I think in Lebanon we need a policy. We lack a very clear policy, development policy. Now, everything falls under that, unless we can, by having some force from NGOs, by academic, more research, more power to have figures in hand, dollar numbers in hand, whatever. But I think we should get at a level where we have a development policy. Lebanon, for the past, I would say, since creation of this, I have not read any one article or any one textbook or a research that says that or addresses the development of the policy of Lebanon. This is important because you were saying about, for example, agriculture. You can, if you don't have an agricultural policy, you don't know what you want to do. We don't know if we need to save having corn or we need to lose it. We don't know. We cannot say. Some people are for exporting things. Some people are for no. Forget about raising these crops in Lebanon. Get them from outside. So unless you can have really a development policy, I know this might be sort of too theoretical, but I mean, we always face this in all our work, whether what is in the universities or now at work or in industry. You're faced by industry, by policy. Why we succeed working in other countries? Because they have development policies.
Okay, thank you. I think your point has been made. No, I see. The only reason I'm allowing Dr. Baer to have that is because of the right to respond. Because you talked about policy and that. I think we'll have this. I think you want to make an intervention in response to that.
No, I would like to say one thing in complementarity to what Nadim said, not in response. I think our government needs us. I think our government needs our brain power. And the in-house brain power that the government has is not enough to do all this. For example, the electricity of Lebanon loses $2 million a day in losses. And I'm sure the ministers of energy and water are trying their best, and the senior administration of the Electricité du Liban are trying their best not to lose this money. One day loss is enough research to finance all of the ideas of scientists around at least AUB. Well, the problem, not the problem, the absence of interaction between the brain power in academia and the political will, no matter how feeble it is in government, is not allowing this political will to grow stronger, and is leaving the good ideas dormant or potentially dormant in scientific. A group of professors from AUB should take an initiative led by IFI. One economist, one engineer in energy, one engineer in agriculture, one health person, and you visit the Minister of Electricity and Energy and Water and tell the minister that your brain power is at his service if you believe that this minister has the minimal political will for change. And even if it's going to be done on voluntary basis, until the dead body sort of kick-starts again, then we'll be able to start saving on being proactive, saving on the losses, so we can leverage those losses into profits for enhancing policy, enhancing adaptation. But the balua, the drain, is so big that no matter how much power you put into it, it's all lost. And I think this is where IFI, which is hosting us today, with the group of professors at AUB, and perhaps outside AUB, should take that extra mile in helping policy where you feel there is a political will, no matter how feeble it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Verge. And on those words of wisdom, I shall declare this meeting has come to an end. And please join me in giving our speaker this time.